Have you ever wondered why some of the kindest people seem to achieve the least success in our world? Why those who faithfully follow the moral precepts taught since childhood often find themselves exploited by those around them? Imagine a man who dedicates his life to doing the right thing, who practices kindness, honesty, and generosity, only to be repeatedly taken advantage of or overshadowed by those who bend the rules. Niccolò Machiavelli, in his famous treatise, The Prince, stated with piercing clarity that a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief. His words, written 5 centuries ago, still cut to the heart of a painful reality experienced by many good people today. From the moment we are taught that virtue carries its own reward, we are led to believe that our inherent goodness will eventually be recognized and celebrated. Yet, how many times have you done the right thing only to be exploited? How many times have you watched as those willing to compromise their integrity surpass you, leaving you with little more than the bitter taste of disappointment? This isn't a modern problem, it is an age-old paradox. Machiavelli's insight reveals that the very traits that we celebrate in childhood, kindness, empathy, and a sense of fairness, can become liabilities in a world that values power and self-interest above all else. When you consistently act from a place of moral integrity, you send a silent signal to the world. You are predictable, you are safe, and you are unlikely to retaliate or impose consequences. And in such a world, where manipulation and exploitation are common, those who are good are often the easiest targets for those with less scruples. In Machiavelli's view, human nature is simple and driven by basic instincts. People are motivated by self-interest and the desire to avoid pain. As a result, when someone exhibits superior ability or moral excellence, it creates an uncomfortable mirror for those around them. They see in you a standard they fear they cannot attain, and rather than being inspired, they are filled with resentment. Schopenhauer's observation, which resonates deeply with Machiavelli's insights, tells us that nothing exasperates people more than someone displaying superior ability. It is this mirror effect that leads to what can be described as intellectual and moral isolation. The truly brilliant minds, the ones who push the boundaries of what is possible, often find themselves ostracized or misunderstood because their excellence makes others feel small, inadequate, or even threatened. In our everyday experiences, this dynamic plays out subtly yet pervasively. You might recall instances where a kind gesture or a moral decision was met not with gratitude but with opportunistic behavior. Colleagues might exploit your willingness to help. Friends might take advantage of your generosity, and even family members might expect you to sacrifice your well-being for theirs. This isn't a flaw in your character, it is a predictable consequence of a system that rewards mediocrity and punishes those who dare to exceed the norm. Machiavelli observed that good people suffer because their virtues, while admirable, are also markers of vulnerability. They tend to be transparent in their intentions, easily read by those who would manipulate or exploit them. The world does not always value truth and decency when these qualities make you appear weak in a competitive landscape. Instead, success is often reserved for those who can combine their strengths with a measure of strategic self-protection. Those who know when to hide their true feelings, when to refrain from oversharing, and when to guard their inner resources. This is not to suggest that one must abandon all morality to succeed. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that in a world rife with exploitation, kindness must be shielded by strategies. Consider the story of Michael, a small business owner who prided himself on treating everyone fairly. When a vendor approached him with an enticing offer, Michael accepted it on a handshake, believing that his reputation for integrity would be rewarded. Instead, the vendor exploited Michael's trust, disappearing with the money and leaving Michael empty-handed. The vendor had carefully observed Michael's consistent pattern of kindness and saw it as a weakness, a signal that he could be easily deceived. This pattern is not isolated. It reflects a broader human tendency where the virtuous become the targets of those driven by self-interest. Studies in modern psychology support this observation, revealing that individuals who display high levels of cooperation and kindness are statistically more likely to experience exploitation, because they do not set firm boundaries or defend their worth aggressively. Machiavelli's perspective, as presented in The Prince, challenges the notion that goodness alone is sufficient for success. Instead, he argues that to survive and thrive in a world that often exploits virtue, one must learn to protect one's kindness with strategy. He famously pointed out that it is much safer to be feared than loved, not because fear is inherently superior, but because fear enforces boundaries and deters exploitation. When you are loved, people tend to believe that you will always be forgiving, that your moral high ground will always protect you. But when you are feared, even just a little, it creates a buffer, a necessary distance that discourages manipulative behavior. This is the bitter lesson that good people must learn, that unguarded kindness, while admirable, can leave you exposed to a world that respects power and self-interest more than compassion. In our modern world, this ancient truth is more relevant than ever. The digital age, with its relentless connectivity and social media platforms that reward vulnerability, often exacerbates the exploitation of kindness. Every kind act, every moment of empathy is documented and shared, sometimes making it easier for opportunists to identify and target those who are most generous. The very transparency that is celebrated as authenticity can also be a gateway for manipulation. The challenge, then, is not to abandon kindness altogether, but to infuse it with a protective measure of strategic self-awareness. You must learn to discern when your kindness is being taken advantage of, and when it is being reciprocated genuinely. It is this balance that Machiavelli hints at, a balance between being good and being guarded, between acting with compassion and asserting your self-worth. But how do you develop this balance? The answer lies in cultivating what might be called intelligent kindness. This concept involves understanding that true strength is not the absence of compassion, but the ability to channel your compassion in a way that does not leave you vulnerable to exploitation. It means developing the emotional intelligence to know when to step back and assert your boundaries, when to say no, and when to protect your inner resources, without sacrificing your integrity. Intelligent kindness requires self-reflection, the courage to recognize your own value beyond your capacity to serve others, and the determination to stand firm even when it is easier to conform to the expectations of those around you. Now, imagine a scenario in the modern workplace where this principle is put into action. Consider an engineer named James, known for his brilliant mind and innovative solutions, yet he is often overshadowed by colleagues who are less capable but more aggressive in self-promotion. In meetings, James remains modest, prefacing his contributions with phrases like, "I might be wrong," thereby diluting the impact of his ideas. His brilliance, though evident, is not fully recognized because he has not learned to assert himself effectively. Meanwhile, his colleague David, who may not be as intellectually gifted, speaks with unwavering confidence, takes credit for ideas that were once James's and, as a result, climbs the corporate ladder quickly. This is the paradox that Machiavelli laid bare. The very traits that make someone genuinely excellent, humility, kindness, and a willingness to collaborate, can also be the traits that allow others to exploit them. The question then arises, how can you, as a good person, protect your strengths while still maintaining your integrity? The answer is not to become callous or to forsake your virtues, but to adopt a strategy that safeguards your kindness without corrupting it. This strategy involves cultivating an awareness of your own worth and learning to project that value to the world. It means understanding that the protection of your kindness is not an act of betrayal to your principles, but a necessary measure to ensure that you are not taken for granted or manipulated. The essence of this approach is to embrace self-respect, to set clear boundaries, and to recognize that your value is not determined solely by how much you give, but by the quality of the energy you preserve within yourself. As we transition into a deeper examination of this phenomenon, consider the notion that the world is structured in such a way that mediocrity is not only accepted, but celebrated, precisely because it does not challenge the status quo. When you are extraordinarily intelligent or exceptionally kind, you become a threat to the average person's sense of self. This is a painful truth. The qualities that set you apart can also isolate you. Machiavelli observed that those who display superior ability tend to generate resentment among others because they force people to confront their own limitations. In modern society, this is evident in the way brilliant individuals are often sidelined or dismissed, not because their ideas lack merit, but because their excellence makes others uncomfortable. The brilliant mind, with all its insights and innovations, can become a social repellent, creating invisible barriers between the individual and the collective. This is not a failure of the individual, but a failure of the system that refuses to celebrate true excellence. The concept of selective exploitation plays a crucial role here. Those who are exceptionally kind or smart often become targets for exploitation because their virtues are taken as signs of vulnerability. Manipulators, whether in personal relationships or professional settings, actively seek out individuals who are unlikely to push back or defend themselves. This dynamic is not a product of modern society alone, it is as old as civilization itself. Throughout history, many who possessed extraordinary intelligence or moral clarity have found themselves isolated, misunderstood, or even persecuted. The historical record is replete with examples of brilliant minds who suffered for their uncompromising commitment to their principles, only to be celebrated posthumously once their ideas no longer posed a threat to the established order. Modern research in psychology supports this view by showing that traits such as excessive agreeableness, a reluctance to engage in conflict, and a tendency to avoid assertiveness can lead to social and professional exploitation. Studies have shown that people who exhibit these traits are more likely to be overlooked for leadership positions, to have their ideas appropriated by others, or to be taken advantage of in both personal and business relationships. This phenomenon, which can be understood as a form of cognitive self-threat, occurs when individuals encounter evidence of excellence that challenges their self-perception. When someone of high capability or moral clarity enters their sphere, the average person may experience a threat to their self-esteem, leading them to unconsciously devalue that excellence as a way to protect their own fragile identity. The painful lesson here, as Machiavelli and later philosophers like Schopenhauer have observed, is that being good or brilliant comes at a cost. The world is not built to reward exceptional virtue or intelligence unconditionally. Instead, it often punishes those who stand out too starkly. And yet, despite this inherent contradiction, there is a way for you to navigate this treacherous landscape without sacrificing your core values. The key is to cultivate what might be called intelligent kindness and strategic self-respect. This means recognizing that while your virtues are valuable, they must be protected by a certain measure of guardedness, a willingness to assert your boundaries and to ensure that your kindness is not mistaken for weakness. This is where the concept of emotional self-mastery becomes essential. You must learn to manage your emotions and to project an image of strength that complements your inner goodness. It is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. Rather, it is about being discerning about when to offer your compassion and when to hold back. This discernment is a skill that can be developed through self-reflection, mindfulness, and a commitment to personal growth. By understanding that your true value lies not in how much you give away, but in the quality of the energy you preserve, you begin to shift the dynamics of your interactions. You learn to recognize when your generosity is being exploited and to take proactive steps to protect yourself without compromising your integrity. Imagine a scenario where you are consistently overshadowed at work by a colleague who, despite having average abilities, exudes confidence and assertiveness. Instead of silently enduring, you start to build a new identity that blends your natural kindness with a newfound assertiveness. A balance that allows you to stand your ground without losing the essence of who you are. This might involve setting clear boundaries, speaking up when your contributions are overlooked, or simply learning to say no when demands exceed what you can reasonably give. Over time, as you practice this balanced approach, you begin to command respect in ways that do not require you to abandon your core values. Your colleagues start to see you not just as a kind person, but as someone who is capable of leading with integrity and strength. This transformation is not instantaneous. It requires continuous effort, self-awareness, and the courage to confront the discomfort of change. There will be moments when you feel vulnerable, when the pressure to conform is overwhelming, or when the fear of being exploited tempts you to retreat into your old patterns. But every step you take toward asserting your self-worth, every boundary you establish, and every time you choose to protect your inner energy, you are reclaiming a part of yourself that is vital to your long-term fulfillment. And, as you do so, you may find that the people who once took advantage of your unguarded kindness begin to fade away, replaced by those who respect your integrity and recognize the strength of your resolve. The insights of Machiavelli, as harsh as they may seem, are not meant to encourage cruelty or deceit for its own sake. Rather, they serve as a reminder that in a world that often exploits the virtuous, protecting your inner self is essential to survival and growth. The journey of intelligent kindness is one of both self-preservation and self-actualization, a path where you learn to balance the genuine compassion that defines you with the strategic self-respect that keeps you from being exploited. It is about reclaiming your power and ensuring that your virtues serve you rather than drain you. In doing so, you create a space where your goodness can flourish, not as a liability, but as a source of strength that inspires others and transforms the environments in which you live and work. Ultimately, the challenge before you is to understand that the world may not always reward unfiltered kindness or raw intelligence, but it does reward those who are smart enough to protect themselves while still giving generously. The paradox is that the very qualities that make you exceptional, your empathy, your brilliance, your integrity, can also render you vulnerable if not carefully managed. By embracing a strategy of intelligent kindness, you learn to navigate a world that often values power over virtue, without losing sight of what truly matters. This is the radical truth, that your ability to remain true to yourself while setting clear boundaries is the key to both personal fulfillment and social respect. As you cultivate this balance, you begin to see that being kind and being strong are not mutually exclusive. They are two sides of the same coin, essential to living a life of purpose and authenticity. And in that balance, you discover the power to not only survive, but to truly thrive.